You might be doing an edit for social media, and you might, for example, want to create a square sequence to edit into to output to, say, Twitter. And obviously the clips that you're using, they're not going to be square. Because you'll want to see what the clips look like within a square frame size as you edit them and manipulate them so you're seeing the key bit of each clip within that square frame size, you need to have a sequence that has a square frame size itself. Also, it might be that you're creating a sequence and you've got a mixture of clips of different frame sizes and frame rates. In that instance, what I would do is usually set up the sequence settings to match either the clips that I have most of, or, again, as we're about to look at, based on the output settings that I want ultimately to output my video as. The other way of creating a sequence is to do it manually. And to get to the options for this, what you do is you go to the File menu, New, and then choose Sequence from the sub menu there. This opens up a new sequence window, and along the left hand side of the window here you have a number of different groups of settings. The groups themselves generally relate to different types of cameras, and these cameras might range from anything from older SD cameras through to HD through to 4K and even digital film cameras. There's a number of different groups here for different types of HD cameras. So DVC Pro HD, for example, are Panasonic broadcast end TV video cameras. XD Cam HD, these are a Sony higher end broadcast TV set of cameras, and so on. Red are film cameras, digital film cameras. They go right up beyond HD into digital film 4K. ARRI is set up for HD and also for UHD, so Ultra HD TV 4K cameras, which have a frame size that's double a standard HD frame size. Now, obviously, if you were shooting on a specific camera and you knew what that camera was and you were trying to match it, you would go to the relevant group, you would pick the relevant setting. I'm going to show you in a second how to manipulate the settings so you can set up and change the frame size to square, because none of these are geared up for square video. But just going back and looking at the settings for a minute, if we take HD as our example, you can see there's three settings here for AVC HD. 1080 HD, so this is full HD frame size and resolution, has a frame size of 1920 by 1080 pixels, and those are using square pixels. As you can see there, there's that 1.0 number again, tells you here square pixels. And as you can see also in here, there are two types of 1080. There's 1080p and 1080i. 1080i has the same frame size. The difference here though is how the frame is scanned. So this is very much a TV broadcasting. If you are using or have footage that's been shot on an HD TV broadcast camera and the footage has been shot for TV broadcast, it will be interlaced. And this is what the I stands for, interlaced scan. And what that means is the camera, when it scans each frame, scans effectively what will be all the odd lines in the frame first, so lines 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on, to the bottom of the frame. And then it goes back and it scans all the even lines. So these two scans are known as fields, and they're sometimes known as upper and lower fields, sometimes odd and even fields. But the frame scan is divided into two scans. Progressive, which is what the P stands for here, is where the whole frame is scanned in one go. So again, think of it as lines. All the lines from top to bottom are done in one scan. All TV broadcast up to HD since the inception of colour television has always used interlaced scan, and that is why, generally speaking, it's more broadcast end cameras that will give you this interlaced option. Anything that is going onto social media, the web, just playback from a computer, anything other than broadcast television is usually always progressive scan. So obviously, if you are dealing with interlaced footage, you would want to make sure that you set up for an interlaced option. If you were not, you would set it up for progressive. The numbers here, 24, 25, 30, 50, 60, these relate to the amount of frames per second, so the frame rate of the video. And there's three most common frame rates out there, 24, 25, and 30. You can see them repeated here, look, 24, 25, 30. This relates again to television and film. So 24 frames a second is the standard frame rate for film, and anything that's been shot on film or digitally shot for film for the last 100 years or so has all been shot at 24 frames per second. 25 frames per second is the frame rate for UK and European TV broadcast. So when the TV system was set up in the UK just after the Second World War, the frame rate that they chose to broadcast with was 25 frames per second. Because of this, if you go out and buy a video camera or video related camera, something like a DSLR camera in Europe, usually it will default to a frame rate of 25 frames per second. If you go to America and buy the same camera, its frame rate will usually default to 30 frames per second, or to be precise, 29.97. 30 frames per second is the frame rate for broadcast TV in America. And therefore, when you buy a video camera in America, North America, the frame rate is set to match the TV broadcast frame rate. Phones, incidentally, default to 30 frames per second, most commonly. The frame rate is really important to get correct if you are doing anything for broadcast television. So if you're doing anything that's going to output on TV in Europe, you would need to make sure that your edit was done at 25 frames per second. Ideally, your footage would be shot at 25 frames per second. And your output would be 25 frames per second. Conversely, if it was in North America, you would shoot at 30, edit at 30, and output at 30. If, however, your output is for social media, then the frame rate is irrelevant. You generally go for the frame rate that the footage was shot at, whether that's 30, 25, 24. If you're viewing video content on a device, whether it's a computer, a modern TV set, a phone, those devices don't care what frame rate you throw at them, and social media doesn't care what frame rate you post up. It's purely a TV broadcast thing. If you're setting up a sequence from scratch, as I say, what you'll try and do is know what footage you're dealing with, select the correct group here, select the correct frame size, select the correct frame rate, choose whether you want interlaced or progressive scan, and then pick the relevant option and click OK. Usually after naming your sequence first here, although you can do that after you've created the sequence as well. If, however, you want a non-standard frame size, it's quite easy to do. You just have to know which preset to pick, and there's only actually one of them that lets you do this, and it's the one right at the top, which is ARRI. So what I would do for square video is go into the ARRI preset, usually go into the 1080 preset, pick my relevant frame rate here. So let's say I'll go for 25 because my footage is 25. Click in settings, change 1920 to 1080. So I've got 1080 by 1080, and that would now give me a square frame size. I would then leave all of the rest of this as it is. I would probably come down and name my sequence down here. So let's call it square edit. I can, at this point, if I want to, actually save that as a preset. So by clicking this Save Preset button here, it opens up a window where I can save out the settings that I've just created. I would give that preset a name, click OK, and then what would happen is it adds that preset to a custom folder at the bottom of all the presets here. Look, there it is. So next time around, I'll just go straight to custom, select my square 1080 option, and away I go. One last little thing just to mention on a basic level, tracks here lets you set up how many video and audio tracks you want as and when you set the sequence up. Usually you can tend to leave this at the default unless you're trying to do some more advanced stuff for broadcast television where you need split channel audio and multi-channel output options for your audio. You can just leave this as the default, and then as you're editing, if you need to add more tracks, you can just do that within the timeline itself. So I'm just going to OK this window now. Here's my new sequence, square edit, and you can see the preview window here is square. I could now drop my video clip onto there. One word of warning here, when you drop your first clip onto a sequence, if you've set it up manually and the sequence settings don't match the clip, it will give you a message to say so. And obviously you'll have done this deliberately. If it was an accident and the two things didn't match, you can go change sequence settings and then you would know that the sequence is then matching the clip. In this instance, I want to go keep existing settings so it doesn't change. there's my square video output, and then I can, for example, just shift the frame around and just optimize the bit of the clip that I'm seeing in that square window.